It was a brisk Wednesday evening on November 8, 2023, when Transoceanic Air Flight 815 departed from Chicago's O'Hare Airport, bound for Paris, Charles de Gaulle. The time was 10:55 p.m., and the enormous Airbus A350 was climbing gracefully through the night sky, settling into its cruising altitude of 39,000 feet over the vast, inky blackness of the North Atlantic. Inside the quiet cabin, most of the 288 passengers had already drifted off to sleep, lulled by the steady hum of the engines, blissfully unaware of the crisis that was about to unfold. The mood was one of peaceful transit, a silent contract between machinery and humanity suspended between two continents. Captain David Miller, a veteran with 25 years in the cockpit, felt the familiar sense of calm that came with a long-haul flight. He ran a routine check of his instruments while his co-pilot, First Officer Maya Vance, reviewed the latest weather data for their arrival in Paris. Everything appeared routine until Miller abruptly clutched his chest, his knuckles turning white. "Maya, something's not right," Miller gasped, his face losing all its color as beads of sweat formed on his brow. He attempted to reach for the communications panel, but his arm hung limp at his side. The seasoned captain, who had navigated thousands of flights through all manner of weather, had suddenly lost command of his own body. Vance instantly seized control of the aircraft as Miller slumped forward, his dead weight pushing the yoke and sending the plane into a sudden, terrifying dive. Warning alarms shrieked to life, filling the cockpit with a cacophony of urgent alerts. Passengers jolted awake by the violent drop screamed in a mixture of confusion and fear. Vance struggled to pull Miller's heavy, unconscious form off the controls, his body an unyielding obstacle. She slammed the emergency call button to summon the cabin crew while wrestling to stabilize the massive airframe. The flight attendants, hearing the alarms, rushed to the cockpit door. "The captain's incapacitated," Vance yelled to the head flight attendant. "Grace, I need him out of this seat so I can fly the plane. We're probably going to have to make an emergency landing." But just as they began to move Miller, the entire cockpit was plunged into darkness. A few heart-stopping seconds later, the backup systems flickered on, but half of their instrument displays remained dead. Vance understood they were in profound jeopardy. "This is escalating," she transmitted, her voice tight with stress. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Transoceanic 815, we have pilot incapacitation and severe electrical system failures." The air traffic controller in Gander, Newfoundland, responded with practiced calm. "Flight 815, we read your emergency. Report your status." "We've lost primary power and our captain is unresponsive. I'm the sole pilot, and I'm not sure I can manage this alone," Vance replied, a slight tremor entering her voice. It was then they heard movement behind them. Everyone turned, expecting another crew member, but saw a woman in a simple dark jacket standing in the doorway. She had short brown hair and intense blue eyes that sparked a flicker of recognition in Vance, though she couldn't place the face. "Who are you?" Grace demanded of the stranger. "Passengers are forbidden from the flight deck, especially now." The woman advanced with a steady gait, her eyes scanning the chaos of flashing warning lights on the main panel. "My name is Captain Jordan Hayes," she stated in a calm, authoritative voice, "and I'm going to help you land this aircraft." Vance stared at her, stunned. The name was instantly familiar, yet it seemed impossible. Captain Jordan Hayes had been reported killed in action 5 years ago on a Special Forces mission. Vance remembered the articles in the aviation journals. "That's not possible," Vance stammered. "Captain Hayes died in 2018 during a classified operation. There was a full military funeral." Jordan moved past them to Miller's seat, quickly checking his pulse. "He's having a massive coronary, but he's alive. He needs a hospital, but first we need to get this plane on the ground." She settled into the captain's chair and her hands began to move over the controls with an effortless familiarity, as if she had flown this very plane her entire life. She seemed to know precisely what to do. "I don't get how you're here," Vance said, her mind reeling. "The Air Force said your aircraft was downed over a hostile zone. They presented your family with a flag at the memorial service." Jordan continued her work on the controls as she spoke. "That's the story they had to release. The reality is far more complex. My jet was shot down, but I survived. I spent 5 years behind enemy lines on intelligence operations I can't even discuss now." She managed to reroute power, bringing some of the dead systems back to life, and the main cockpit lights flickered back on. "I was finally exfiltrated last month, but for national security, the military needed my survival to remain a secret. They put me on this civilian flight as a quiet way to get me back stateside." Grace, the flight attendant, remained skeptical. "If you're a military pilot, let's see some ID." Jordan produced a military identification card with her photo and handed it over. It appeared legitimate, with recent issue dates, but Grace had never seen one like it. "This shows you as active duty, but it has a security classification I've never heard of," Grace noted. "That's because I'm part of a unit that technically doesn't exist," Jordan replied. "Right now, our priority has to be saving everyone on this plane. We can discuss my history later." Vance looked at the navigation display and saw they were still in a slow, steady descent. "Even if you are who you claim, we have catastrophic problems. Half our systems are offline, and I don't think we can reach Paris." Jordan studied the remaining instruments for a moment. "We're not going to Paris. We need to turn back and make for Halifax. It's the closest major airport that can handle an A350 in this state." "But we don't have the fuel to get back to North America," Vance argued. "We've burned too much, and with these system malfunctions, our consumption rate is through the roof." "I've run the numbers," Jordan said with unshakable confidence. "If we descend to 28,000 feet and adjust our airspeed, we can reach Halifax with maybe 10 minutes of fuel in reserve. It'll be tight, but it's our only real choice." Vance was floored by how quickly Jordan had analyzed the complex fuel situation. "How do you know this aircraft so well? This is a commercial Airbus, not a military fighter jet." "During my 5 years in the field, I had to learn to fly a wide variety of aircraft to execute my missions. I spent 3 months studying civilian airliners in case I ever needed to blend in with commercial air traffic." Jordan began banking the large plane around as Vance contacted air traffic control. "Halifax Control, this is Flight 815. We are declaring an emergency and requesting immediate clearance for landing. We have pilot incapacitation and multiple system failures." The controller in Halifax came back immediately. "Flight 815, we have you on our scopes. You are cleared for an emergency approach to runway 32. Emergency services are being mobilized at the airport." As they started their descent toward Nova Scotia, Jordan shared more about her past. "When my surveillance plane went down 5 years ago, I was on a mission to gather intel on enemy weapons development. The aircraft crashed in a remote mountain range, and I was the sole survivor." "Why didn't you radio for help to let them know you were alive?" Vance asked. "The crash was deep inside hostile territory, and my communications gear was destroyed. I had to evade enemy search parties for weeks before I could move. By the time I made contact with friendly assets, I had already been declared dead, and it was deemed more strategically valuable for me to remain a ghost." Jordan continued flying the plane with smooth, precise movements as she explained. "The intelligence I had gathered was so critical that they needed me to stay undercover and continue my work in the region. For almost 5 years I lived in the shadows, collecting information that prevented several large-scale attacks." Vance was beginning to understand Jordan's preternatural calm in the face of this disaster. "So you've been in high-stakes situations like this before?" "Many times. When you spend 5 years living behind enemy lines, you learn to keep a clear head under extreme pressure. You also learn that there's always a path forward if you analyze the problem logically and refuse to panic." The plane was now at 28,000 feet, and the Canadian coastline was getting closer, but Jordan noticed one of their engines was vibrating abnormally, and its temperature gauge was climbing into the red. "We've got another problem," Jordan said to Vance. "The right engine is overheating. We might lose it before we get to Halifax." Vance checked the engine readouts and felt a fresh wave of fear. "If we lose that engine, can we still reach the airport?" "Yes, but we'll have to dump fuel and our approach will be much faster than regulation. Tell the cabin to brace for a very hard landing." Grace made an announcement over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your head flight attendant. We are encountering some technical issues and will be making an emergency landing in Halifax instead of proceeding to Paris. Please stay in your seats with your seatbelts tightly fastened and pay close attention to the safety instructions from your crew." The announcement sent a ripple of anxiety through the cabin. Some passengers started to weep, while others began to pray. The flight attendants moved methodically through the aisles, helping everyone prepare for a potential impact. Back in the cockpit, Jordan wrestled with controls that were growing increasingly unresponsive. The right engine finally gave out with a loud bang, and more warning lights lit up the instrument panel. "Engine 1 is out," Jordan announced. "We're on a single engine now, but we should still be able to make it to Halifax if nothing else fails." Vance watched Jordan manage the crisis and was deeply impressed by her skill. "I've never seen anyone handle a compromised aircraft this well. Where did you learn this?" When you're flying stolen enemy planes in hostile airspace, riddled with bullet holes and failing systems, you learn to make do with what you've got. This is frankly less stressful than some of the flights I made during my clandestine operations. Halifax was now visible on the horizon, and the airport had cleared all other air traffic, creating a sterile environment for their arrival. Jordan could see the flashing lights of fire trucks and ambulances lining the runway, standing by. "Halifax Tower, Flight 815 is 10 miles out, requesting final approach clearance," Jordan said into her radio. "Flight 815, you are cleared to land. Wind is light, visibility is clear, emergency crews are in position." As they got closer, Jordan saw that their remaining engine was also showing signs of imminent failure. The oil pressure was dropping rapidly, and the temperature was spiking. "The left engine might not make it," she told Vance. "If it quits, we'll have to glide this thing onto the runway with zero power." Vance had never faced a situation this dire. Is that even possible with an aircraft this size? It's been done. In 2001, an Air Transat flight glided to a landing in the Azores after running out of fuel. Our situation is comparable, except we have a prepared runway to aim for instead of an island in the middle of the ocean. Just as Jordan finished her sentence, the left engine made a horrible grinding sound and went silent. Now they were flying a 450,000-pound aircraft with no thrust, a massive metal glider descending through the dark sky toward Halifax Stanfield. "We're committed now," Jordan said evenly. "No power, no go-arounds. We either make this runway or we don't." The plane was descending much faster than normal, and Jordan had to use every bit of her expertise to keep it aligned with the runway. Vance watched the altimeter unwind at an alarming rate as the ground rushed up to meet them. 500 feet, Vance called out as they neared the threshold. "I see the approach lights," Jordan replied, her focus absolute. 300 feet, 200, 100. The aircraft slammed onto the runway with a violent jolt and bounced twice before Jordan managed to wrestle it back onto the tarmac. Without engines for reverse thrust, she had to rely solely on the wheel brakes and spoilers to slow the heavy jet down. The plane careened down the runway for what felt like an eternity before finally rolling to a stop just a few hundred feet from the end. Fire trucks and ambulances immediately converged on the aircraft as Jordan went through the shutdown checklist for the remaining systems. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are safely on the ground in Halifax," Grace announced over the intercom. "Please remain seated until emergency personnel give us the all-clear to evacuate." Vance looked over at Jordan with sheer disbelief. "That was unbelievable. I don't think any other pilot in the world could have landed that plane." "We're not finished yet," Jordan replied. "We need to get Captain Miller to a hospital and confirm all passengers are unharmed." Emergency medical teams boarded and immediately went to work on Miller, who was still unconscious but had a steady pulse. They carried him off on a stretcher and sped toward the nearest hospital. The passengers were safely evacuated using the emergency slides and were transported to the terminal, where they were provided with food, lodging, and arrangements for a new flight to Paris. As the last passenger deplaned, Halifax airport security approached Jordan. They had been informed of her role in saving the flight, but her identity was a mystery. "Ma'am, we're going to need to see some identification," the security chief said. "The flight manifest has no one named Jordan Hayes listed on board." Jordan presented the same military ID card she had shown Grace. "I was on this flight under classified orders. You'll need to contact the Pentagon to verify." The chief looked at the unusual ID and made a call to his superiors. After a few minutes, he returned, his face a mask of confusion. "This is highly irregular," he said. "The Pentagon confirms your identity, but they also state that according to their official records, Captain Jordan Hayes has been deceased for 5 years. "It's a long story," Jordan said. "There are aspects of my service I cannot discuss due to national security. I expect someone from military intelligence will be here shortly to clarify what they can." As if on cue, 2 men in dark business suits arrived at the airport less than an hour later. They introduced themselves as agents from a classified military intelligence unit and requested a private word with Jordan. Vance watched as Jordan walked off with the 2 men, leaving her with 1,000 unanswered questions about what had just happened and how a pilot who was supposed to be dead had materialized at the exact moment she was needed most. The next morning, Vance read in the news that Flight 815 had made a successful emergency landing due to a combination of mechanical failure and pilot illness. There was no mention of Jordan Hayes or the incredible fact that a woman presumed dead had just saved over 300 lives. Vance searched for more information about Jordan online, but every result led back to old articles from 2018 detailing her death on a covert mission. It was as if the events of the previous night were being systematically erased. A week later, Vance received a call from a blocked number. When she picked up, she recognized Jordan's voice. "Maya, it's Jordan. I wanted to call and thank you for your trust during that emergency. You were instrumental in saving a lot of people that night." "Jordan, where are you? I tried to look you up, but everything still says you died 5 years ago. What's the real story?" "I can't tell you everything, Maya, but I can say that some military operations require individuals to be removed from all official records. For 5 years I was a ghost, working in places where the slightest misstep could have triggered an international incident." "So you're still alive and working for the military?" "In a sense, yes. But Jordan Hayes will remain officially dead. The woman you met on that flight doesn't exist in any public or private database." Vance was bewildered. "Then how did you end up on our plane?" "I was being transported back to the U.S. after finishing my final mission. The military chose your flight because they believed a commercial airliner would be a more secure and discreet method than their own transport. They never imagined you'd actually need my skills." "Will I ever see you again?" "It's unlikely. I'm being reassigned to a new classified role that will require a new identity. But I wanted you to know that meeting you and helping to save that plane was one of the most meaningful things I've done in 5 years." Vance heard muffled voices in the background, and Jordan's tone shifted. "I have to go. Take care of yourself, Maya. And if anyone asks you about that night, just tell them you're not entirely sure how you managed to land the plane. Sometimes it's best for heroes to remain anonymous." The line went dead, and Vance never heard from Jordan again. She honored her request and kept the secret of what truly transpired on Flight 815. Whenever other pilots asked about the incredible emergency landing, she would simply attribute it to her training and excellent teamwork. Captain Miller made a full recovery from his heart attack and was back in the cockpit 6 months later. He had no memory of the final, critical portion of the flight and always credited Vance with saving his life and the lives of everyone on board. The Airbus A350 was repaired and put back into service with Transoceanic Air. The official cause of the electrical cascade failure was never conclusively determined, though mechanics discovered evidence of sophisticated, temporary repairs made to critical wiring harnesses during the flight. Vance continued her career with Transoceanic Air and eventually made captain. She never forgot the night a ghost from the past materialized in her cockpit and saved them all. Sometimes, late at night on long ocean crossings, Vance would gaze at the stars and wonder if Jordan Hayes was still out there somewhere, living under a new name, working in the shadows to keep the world safe. She hoped that wherever Jordan was, she had found a measure of peace after 5 years of living as a phantom. Years later, Vance would read classified briefings about thwarted terrorist plots and successful military operations against impossible odds. She would wonder if Jordan had played a role in any of them, using the same calm expertise and incredible skill that had saved Flight 8115. The official record would always state that Captain Jordan Hayes died in 2018 on a classified mission. But Vance knew the truth. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who are never meant to exist, and the most significant victories are the ones that are never reported. The enigma of how a dead pilot had appeared in her cockpit would remain with Vance for the rest of her career. It was a constant reminder that in a world of clandestine operations and secret wars, there were individuals willing to sacrifice everything, even their own names, to protect others. But the story didn't end there. 3 months after the incident, Vance was summoned to a secure conference room at Halifax Stanfield. 2 military officers were waiting for her, along with a woman she didn't immediately recognize. "First Officer Vance," the senior officer began, "we need to debrief you on the events of Flight 815. Certain details have emerged that we believe you have a right to know." The woman stepped into the light, and Vance gasped. It was Jordan Hayes, but she looked different. Her hair was longer, and she was dressed in civilian clothes instead of the functional dark jacket from that night. "Hello, Maya," Jordan said with a faint smile. "I know this must be confusing, but I wanted to provide more context for what happened to me during those 5 years. Vance sat down, still in shock at seeing Jordan again. "I thought you said we would never meet again." "The situation changed," Jordan replied. "My superiors decided that maintaining total secrecy was creating more complications than it was solving. They want you to know the whole story, or as much as they're authorized to share." The military officer opened a file stamped "Top Secret." "Captain, Hayes's mission in 2018 was to infiltrate a global terrorist syndicate that was planning to attack civilian airliners. When her aircraft was shot down, she was actually captured by the very group she was investigating." Jordan took over the narrative. "They held me captive for 6 months, but I eventually escaped and then spent the next 4.5 years living among them, posing as a convert to their ideology. I gathered intelligence that helped thwart dozens of attacks on airlines across the globe." "The intel Jordan provided saved thousands of lives," the officer added, "but we couldn't acknowledge she was alive because it would have compromised numerous ongoing operations and endangered other agents." Vance was astounded by the revelations. "So when you showed up on our flight, you were finally coming home after 5 years deep undercover?" "Not quite," Jordan said. "I was actually being transported to a secure debriefing facility when our flight ran into trouble. When I heard the emergency alarms, I knew I had to act. I couldn't just sit back in my seat and let people die when I possessed the skills to save them." The officer showed Vance a series of photos from Jordan's time undercover. "These are some of the terrorist training camps where Jordan lived for over 4 years. She learned to fly their aircraft, memorized their operational plans, and even took part in their training exercises to maintain her cover. "It was the most difficult thing I've ever done," Jordan admitted. "Every single day, I had to pretend to despise my own country and support people who wanted to murder innocent civilians. There were moments when I wasn't sure if I could maintain the charade." Vance looked at the photos and saw Jordan in various disguises, sometimes standing next to men who were known international criminals. "How did you manage to stay sane through all of that?" "I focused on the mission and reminded myself of all the lives I was saving. Every piece of intel I sent back meant fewer people would die in a bombing or a hijacking. That knowledge was what kept me going when everything else seemed hopeless." The officer elaborated on Jordan's accomplishments. "She identified 23 distinct plots against civilian aviation and helped us dismantle the financial networks funding these operations. The intelligence she provided led to the arrest of over 200 terrorists in 12 different countries. But the most important discovery was stopping Operation Skyfall. They were planning to simultaneously attack 5 major international airports on the same day," Jordan said, "using hijacked planes loaded with chemical agents. If that attack had gone through, it would have killed tens of thousands of people." Vance felt a cold dread thinking about what could have been. When was this attack scheduled to happen? "Next month," the officer answered. "We were able to neutralize the threat because of the intelligence Jordan provided, but we had to wait until all the key players were in custody before we could safely bring her home." Jordan looked weary as she continued her story. "The hardest part wasn't the physical danger or the primitive living conditions. It was knowing that my family believed I was dead, and I couldn't tell them otherwise. My parents held a memorial service for me. My sister named her daughter after me because she thought I'd never get to meet her." "That's actually the reason we're telling you this," the officer said. "Jordan is going to be reunited with her family next week, but she wanted to thank you personally first for trusting her during the emergency. You could have refused her help, and everyone on that plane would have perished." Vance shook her head. "I should be thanking her. She saved my life and the lives of all our passengers. I was completely overwhelmed by that series of failures." "No, you weren't," Jordan said with conviction. "You kept your cool under immense pressure, and you were willing to accept assistance from a stranger. Many pilots would have been too arrogant or too frightened to let someone else take the controls." The officer presented Vance with one final document. "This is Jordan's official service record. As of today, she's being reinstated to active duty with full military honors. She's also being awarded the Medal of Honor for her service during those 5 years under cover. But more importantly," Jordan added, "I'm being assigned to a new program to train airline pilots on how to handle terrorist and hijacking situations. I'll be working with the commercial aviation sector to make air travel safer for everyone." Vance was thrilled to hear this. "So you'll be able to have a normal life again?" "As normal as it can be for someone who's been legally dead for 5 years," Jordan laughed. "But yes, I'm looking forward to sleeping in my own bed and eating food that wasn't prepared over an open fire." The officer collected his files. "We'll need you to sign some non-disclosure agreements regarding the classified aspects of this story. You can tell people that Jordan helped save the flight, but the details of her undercover work must remain secret." Vance signed the papers without a second thought. "Of course. Can I ask just one more thing?" "Go ahead," Jordan replied. "How did you get into the cockpit so quickly that night? The flight attendant said they never saw you leave your seat in the main cabin." Jordan gave a mysterious smile. "When you spend 5 years moving undetected through terrorist compounds, you learn how to get around without being noticed. Let's just say that airline security has some vulnerabilities that I'm looking forward to helping them fix in my new role." After the meeting, Jordan walked with Vance to the airport parking lot. "I wanted to give you something," she said, pulling a small metal pin from her pocket. "This is a special aviator's pin only given to pilots who have saved lives in extraordinary circumstances." Vance examined the pin. It depicted an eagle with outstretched wings and had the words, "Guardian Angel" engraved beneath it. "I can't accept this," Vance said. "You're the one who saved everybody?" "We saved them together," Jordan replied. "And I want you to have this to remember, that sometimes the most courageous thing a pilot can do is trust their gut and accept help when it's offered." Vance pinned the emblem to her uniform jacket. "I will never forget that night, or what you taught me about staying focused under pressure." "Just promise me one thing," Jordan said as they reached their cars. "If you ever find yourself in another crisis, remember that there's always a solution if you think clearly and refuse to give up. And if you ever encounter another pilot who needs help, don't think twice about offering it," Vance promised, and the two women shared a hug before parting ways. As Jordan drove off, Vance wondered if this would be another mysterious disappearance, but this time was different. A few weeks later, Vance saw Jordan's picture in an aviation trade magazine. The feature story was about a new counterterrorism training program for commercial pilots, and Jordan was named as the program's director. She was finally able to use her real name and be acknowledged for her service. The article stated that Captain Hayes had survived a plane crash and spent several years on classified missions before returning to help bolster airline security. It was vague on the details, but it was enough to let the world know that she was alive and still serving her country. Vance clipped the article and kept it in her flight bag as a memento of the night a ghost had saved her life. She also began volunteering to help train other pilots in emergency protocols, passing on the lessons she had learned from Jordan about maintaining calm and thinking methodically under duress. Years later, when Vance became a training captain herself, she would often tell new co-pilots about the importance of teamwork and accepting help during an emergency. She never mentioned Jordan by name or revealed the classified details, but she always stressed that sometimes assistance can come from the most unexpected places. The Airbus A350 that had nearly been lost that night continued to fly for transoceanic air for many more years. It was eventually retired and placed in an aviation museum, where a small plaque near the cockpit honored the crew who had saved the lives of 288 passengers during a multiple system failure over the Atlantic. The plaque mentioned Captain Miller, who had recovered from his heart attack and flew until retirement. It also mentioned First Officer Vance, who had been promoted to captain and had become one of the airline's most esteemed training officers. But there was no mention of Jordan Hayes or the enigmatic woman who had appeared in the cockpit when all hope seemed gone. Her contribution remained classified, known only to a select few who had sworn to keep her secret. Jordan continued her work in aviation security, helping to create new procedures that made flying safer for millions of people worldwide. She finally met the niece who had been named in her memory and was able to rebuild the bonds with her family. Sometimes, late at night, while reviewing security protocols or training manuals, Jordan would think back to Flight 815 and feel an immense sense of gratitude that her years of sacrifice had perfectly prepared her for that moment when her skills were needed most. The official story would always be that First Officer Vance had saved the flight through quick thinking and superb training. But Jordan knew the truth, that sometimes heroes operate in the shadows, and the most important victories are the ones that never make the headlines. And somewhere over the Atlantic on clear, quiet nights, when the sky is full of stars, pilots still tell the apocryphal story of the ghost who appeared in a cockpit and saved 300 souls. They don't know her name or where she came from, but they know she represents the very best of their profession. Skilled aviators who will risk everything to bring their passengers home safely. 2 years after the incident, Vance had an unexpected visitor at her home near Boston. She was making dinner when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find a man in his 60s, wearing a military dress uniform adorned with medals and ribbons. "Captain Vance, my name is General Robert Hayes," he said with a grave expression. "I'm the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. I need to speak with you about Captain Jordan Hayes and the events of Flight 815. Vance ushered him inside, wondering why an officer of his rank would be visiting her personally. The general sat in her living room and opened a briefcase filled with classified files. "What I am about to share with you is top secret," he began. "But recent developments have made it imperative that you understand more about Jordan Hayes's true identity and her service to this country." He produced a thick dossier with Jordan's photo on the front. Captain Hayes wasn't just any military pilot. She was part of an elite clandestine unit called Project Nomad, comprised of aviators who are officially non-existent. These pilots undertake missions so dangerous and sensitive that they must be completely severed from their former lives. Vance stared at the file in awe. So there are other pilots like Jordan who are officially deceased. 12 of them, to be exact, the general confirmed. They operate globally, infiltrating terrorist organizations, gathering critical intelligence, and preventing attacks that could kill thousands. Jordan was one of our very best. He showed Vance photos of Jordan in various disguises during her 5 years under cover. In some, she had blonde hair and was dressed as a European businesswoman. In others, her skin was darkened and she wore traditional Central Asian clothing. She became fluent in 5 languages and mastered dozens of different aircraft, the general explained. She could assimilate into any culture and convince people she was someone else entirely. Vance studied the photos in disbelief. How did she learn to do all of this? The Project Nomad training program takes 3 years to complete, he said. Pilots learn advanced combat skills, multiple languages, cultural anthropology, psychology, and extreme survival techniques. They also undergo plastic surgery to alter their appearance and learn to fully inhabit new personas. He showed Vance a before and after photo of Jordan. This is her before she joined Project Nomad, and this is her appearance after the program. As you can see, she looks like a completely different person. Vance was stunned by the transformation. But when I met her on the plane, she looked like the first photo, not the second. That's because she had reconstructive surgery to restore her original features upon completing her assignment, the general explained. We do this for all Project Nomad pilots when they return from long-term missions. It helps them reintegrate into their old lives. He pulled out another document. But Jordan's case was unique. During her 5 years undercover, she uncovered something that changed our entire understanding of global terrorism. The general unfurled a map covered in interconnected cells around the world. We always believed these were disparate groups that occasionally cooperated. But Jordan discovered they are all secretly controlled by a single master organization known as the Syndicate. Vance looked at the map, at the red dots linked by lines indicating command structures between different terrorist factions. So all these attacks across the world are being coordinated by the same entity? Precisely. And the Syndicate was planning something they called the Final Dawn, a coordinated cyber attack on aviation systems worldwide that would have grounded every commercial aircraft on Earth for months. He showed Vance complex diagrams of computer viruses and hacking tools. They had developed a method to seize control of air traffic control systems and onboard flight navigation computers. On the designated day, they would have caused hundreds of aircraft to crash simultaneously. Vance felt a wave of nausea. How many people would have died? Our models projected at least 50,000 fatalities from the initial crashes, and millions more from the ensuing global economic collapse, the general said grimly. The airline industry would have been decimated, and public trust in air travel would have been shattered for decades. He showed Vance photos of Jordan meeting with high-level terrorist leaders. She spent 3 years earning their trust and rising through their ranks to become one of their chief operational planners. She was actually put in charge of coordinating the attacks on North American airports. That must have been an incredible psychological burden for her, Vance said. It nearly broke her, the general admitted. She had to watch these individuals plan mass murder and feign support for their ideology. She even had to assist with smaller attacks to maintain her cover, though we always ensured we had forewarning to neutralize the threats. He produced psychological evaluation reports. Jordan suffered from severe depression and PTSD during her mission. She was utterly isolated from everyone she loved and had to live every day surrounded by people who wanted to destroy everything she stood for. Vance read sections of the reports and saw that Jordan had repeatedly requested to be extracted from the mission, but her handlers convinced her to stay because she was so close to uncovering the syndicate's ultimate plan. "Why are you telling me all of this now?" Vance asked. The general's expression grew even more somber. "Because the syndicate discovered they were infiltrated. They know Jordan was a spy, and they have issued a kill order on her life. Every terrorist cell in the world is now actively hunting her." He showed Vance surveillance photos of suspicious individuals casing Jordan's apartment building and workplace. "We've already thwarted 3 assassination attempts in the last month. We need to move Jordan to a secure facility, but she is refusing to go into hiding." "Why won't she accept protection?" Vance asked. "She says she is tired of living in the shadows and wants to have a normal life for once. She's also concerned that if she disappears again, the syndicate might target her family to draw her out." The general closed the file and looked directly at Vance. "That's where you come in. Jordan trusts you and respects your judgment. We need you to convince her to accept our protection." Vance was taken aback by the request. "I've only met her a few times. Why would she listen to me?" "Because you're one of the only people who knows her true story and still treats her like a human being. Everyone else in her life either thinks she's dead or sees her as a government asset. You're the only one who just sees her as Jordan Hayes, the pilot who helped you save your flight." The general handed Vance a secure satellite phone. "This will connect you directly to Jordan. We need you to call her and arrange to meet. Try to make her understand that going into hiding is the only way to keep herself and her family safe." Vance took the phone, hesitant about being drawn into such a perilous situation. "What if the terrorists find out I'm helping her? Will they target me too?" "We will provide full protection for you and your family," the general assured her. "But we must act quickly. Our intelligence indicates that the syndicate is planning a major attempt on Jordan's life within the next 72 hours. That evening, Vance called Jordan using the secure phone. Jordan picked up on the first ring, as if expecting the call. "Maya, I was wondering when they would contact you," Jordan said. "I assume someone from the government sent you to convince me to become a ghost again." "How did you know?" Vance asked. "Because they've been trying to get me to go into hiding for weeks, and they're out of ideas." They likely thought hearing it from a friend might make a difference. Vance could hear the deep weariness in Jordan's voice. "Jordan, they showed me surveillance photos. People are actively trying to kill you. This is real." "I know it's real, but I'm done being afraid. For 5 years, I lived every day wondering if that was the day someone would discover my true identity and put a bullet in my head. I cannot go back to living like that." "But if you don't hide, they might succeed," Vance pointed out. "Perhaps. But at least I'll die as myself, not as some fabricated persona. I've spent so many years pretending to be other people, I'm not even sure I remember who Jordan Hayes really is anymore." Vance could hear the profound pain in Jordan's voice and understood the true cost of her years of service. "What if there's another way, something that would let you keep your life but still be safe?" "I'm listening," Jordan said. Vance thought for a moment. "What if we could neutralize the threat instead of just running from it? You know more about the syndicate than anyone. Maybe we can use that knowledge to dismantle them for good." "The government has been trying to destroy the syndicate for decades. What makes you think we could succeed where they have failed?" "Because they've always been fighting from the outside. You were on the inside. You know their methods, their weaknesses, their command structure. Maybe that gives us an advantage they've never had." Jordan was silent for a long time. It would be extraordinarily dangerous. It would mean stepping back into that world one last time. But it would also mean you could finally have a real life when it's over, Vance pressed. No more hiding, no more fake identities, no more looking over your shoulder. I'll consider it, Jordan said finally. But if we do this, we'll need a team of people we can trust without reservation. The next day, Vance met with Jordan and General Hayes at a secure military base outside Boston. Jordan looked exhausted but resolute as she spread maps and intelligence reports across a large conference table. "I've been thinking about Maya's proposal," Jordan began, "and I believe there may be a way to cripple the syndicate permanently, but it will involve taking an immense risk." She pointed to a location on a map of a remote mountainous region. "In 2 weeks, the syndicate is holding their annual leadership summit in a fortified compound in the Zagros Mountains. All of their top commanders will be present, including the enigmatic figure they call the Architect, who has been running the organization for over 2 decades. General Hayes examined the map. "We've known about this summit for years, but the compound is impenetrable to a conventional military assault. We've never been able to get an asset close." "That's because you've been thinking like soldiers," Jordan replied. "But I'm thinking like a spy. What if we don't attack the compound? What if we destroy the organization from within?" She laid out detailed blueprints of the facility. "I memorized these schematics during my time undercover. There is a central server room that controls all of the syndicate's global operations. If we could introduce a powerful virus into that system, we could annihilate their entire network in a single stroke." Vance looked at the plans. "But how would we gain access to that server room?" "I would go back undercover one final time," Jordan said. "They believe I'm dead, so they won't expect me to appear at their summit. I could infiltrate the compound and plant the virus." General Hayes shook his head. "That's a suicide mission. If anyone recognizes you, you'll be executed on the spot." "Not if I don't look like myself," Jordan countered. She produced photos of a woman who looked nothing like the Jordan that Vance knew. "This is Fatima al-Hamad, a terrorist bomb maker who was killed in a drone strike in Syria last month. She was scheduled to attend the summit, but the syndicate doesn't know she's dead." She showed them more intelligence. "With some plastic surgery and training, I can assume her identity. I learned enough about explosives during my time undercover to pass as her." Vance was horrified by the idea. "You want to undergo surgery to look like a dead terrorist? That's insane." "It's the only way," Jordan insisted. "And the surgery would be temporary. After the mission, they can restore my original appearance." General Hayes studied the proposal. "Even if you succeed in infiltrating the compound, how would you escape after planting the virus? The facility will be on high alert once they realize what's happening." Jordan indicated an area on the map near the compound. "There's an old abandoned airstrip about 5 miles away. If someone could get a small aircraft there, I could steal a vehicle and fly out during the ensuing chaos." "Who would fly the escape plane?" the general asked. Jordan looked at Vance. "Someone I trust with my life. Someone who has already demonstrated she can perform under impossible pressure." Vance realized Jordan was asking her to join this incredibly dangerous mission. "You want me to fly the escape plane? I'm a commercial pilot. I don't have any military training." "You know how to remain calm in a crisis, and you know how to fly. That's all that matters. The escape plane would be a simple Cessna, nothing complex." General Hayes was dubious. "This plan has too many points of failure. If any single element goes wrong, you'll both be killed." "If we don't attempt this, the syndicate will eventually succeed with one of their attacks," Jordan replied. "How many innocent people will die because we were too afraid to take a calculated risk?" Vance thought about the 288 passengers on Flight 815 who would have died if Jordan hadn't been willing to take risks to save them. "If Jordan is willing to do this, then I'll help her, but we need to plan every single detail." General Hayes reluctantly gave his approval for the mission, but insisted on providing extensive support and multiple emergency extraction scenarios. If this goes sideways, I want numerous options to get you both out of there alive. For the next week, Jordan underwent intensive preparations to become Fatima al-Hamad. Military surgeons performed subtle plastic surgery to alter the shape of her nose and jawline. Hollywood makeup artists taught her how to change her appearance with cosmetics and prosthetics. Language experts drilled her on the specific Arabic dialect that Fatima would have spoken. Meanwhile, Vance received a crash course in covert aviation. She learned to fly in hostile airspace, land on unlit primitive airstrips, and execute emergency takeoffs under fire. The most important thing to remember, her instructor told her, is that in clandestine operations, speed and stealth trump perfection. You don't have to be the best pilot in the world. You just have to be good enough to get it done. Vance also learned about the computer virus Jordan would be deploying. It's code-named Medusa, a cyber warfare expert explained. Once it enters the syndicate's network, it will replicate and spread to every connected device globally. Within 6 hours, their entire digital infrastructure, communications, finances, operational plans, will be permanently wiped. The virus was stored on a device that looked like a common USB flash drive. Jordan just needs to plug this into any computer on their network. The virus will handle the rest. As the mission date drew closer, Vance felt a growing sense of dread. She had never been involved in anything more dangerous than a commercial airline emergency, and now she was about to take part in a secret war against global terrorism. The night before they were scheduled to depart for the Middle East, Jordan came to Vance's hotel room. "I need you to know that you don't have to do this," Jordan said. "I can find another pilot if you've had second thoughts." Vance had considered backing out, but looking at Jordan, she knew how much was at stake. "I'm terrified, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. We're a team, just like on Flight 815. A rare smile touched Jordan's lips. "Thank you. Having you there will make all the difference. I know that no matter what happens, you'll find a way to get us both home." They spent the rest of the evening reviewing the mission plan one last time, poring over every detail and contingency. Vance had to admit that, alongside her fear, she also felt a thrill at the prospect of striking back at the people who had caused so much pain and suffering. "After this is over," Jordan said, as they finished their planning, "I want to go back to being a normal pilot. No more secret missions, no more fake names, just flying planes and helping people get where they need to go." "That sounds perfect," Vance replied, "and maybe we could even work for the same airline. I think we make a pretty good team." Jordan laughed. "I'd like that. It would be nice to have a friend who actually understands what it's like to risk everything to save lives." As they turned in for the night, both women knew that the coming days would decide not only their own fates, but potentially the safety of millions of innocent people around the world. The mission to destroy the syndicate was about to begin, and there would be no turning back once they crossed into enemy territory.